Nowadays I'm trapped off, doing tracks to blast off. Being lonely's a regular thing, my phone don't ring. I'm up in the lab composing. Seems like every girl I've chosen, heart's frozen. And maybe I don't know how to pick though. Seems like every chick I know's out to get though. And I ain't got a lot of that, and I don't front about it. You think I'ma be hitting your ball without it? Crazy, where they come off at? I'm about to start letting these bras know off the bat. If you ain't bringing up into the table, then leave. Give it to a room to brave, and then maybe you can receive something real instead of the fake. Something you feel and appreciate, worth the wait. It's like
always got to be something. And it's always got to be something. This is Governor Sulak, and I got a few articles. There's a few things to talk about. If you'll notice, I am wearing my Christmas attire. That's what this is. That's a little knit cap there, and I got a little scarf on. It's hard to see. I can't rotate the camera. But yeah, I got this article about the recent attack in Jersey City. That was pretty messed up. And then I got a few on, I don't really want to talk about impeachment that much, but like that's what everybody was talking about yesterday. So I'm going to do the one from Karl Rove, and then another one from the editorial board. This is all Wall Street Journal. It's what I got. So, beginning with, let's see. Oh, there's another one. Yeah, this one's from the editorial board too. So this is what I'm going to start with. See, I'm at the Fleet Starbase though. Here's the lounge. I'm trying to find the lounge. I'm gonna chill at the lounge and get rid of these damn tribbles. Look at all these things. Clean it up. There we go. That's better. Cool. And the transporter pad. Yeah, if we're gonna be getting announcements in the background, I might do this at a different location, honestly. So we'll do this on mode. I'm gonna go to the starship here. Navigation. Oh man, sometimes this is kind of a pain. I can't just like talk to the transporter chief. I gotta go. I'm gonna run back. I'm not gonna slowly stroll across this campus here. I'm gonna go straight to the transporter pad. You're killing my vibes here. Transport to sector. There we go. So, this one. Anti-Semitism, real and imagined. Worry about murders in Jersey City, not Trump's executive order. As emergency personnel and investigators work at a scene of a shooting of a kosher market in Jersey City on December the 11th. Now we will go to the bridge. Tuesday's murder of 3 people in a kosher grocery store in Jersey City, New Jersey, now appears to have been an anti-Semitic attack, with the mayor saying that the suspect targeted the market frequented by Hasidic Jews. The police shootout began with an attack on civilians in the store, according to the city's director of public safety. News reports say one of the alleged shooters may have been a member of the conspiratorial Black Hebrew Israelites and had anti-Semitic social media posts. So you may remember the Black Hebrew Israelites from the beginning of the year, but probably not. There was that whole thing with the Covington Catholic school kids, and everybody was saying that they did things and said things that they didn't, and just projecting a bunch of nonsense. But you know who was there spouting hate speech? The Black Hebrew Israelites. But they got a pass for that because progressive versions of racism don't include actual racism. It includes politically motivated accusations of racism. But real racism, I don't know if they care about that much. That was quite an accusation, but honestly, I'm kind of fed up with this. I think it's mostly the media. So, if anti-Semitism is confirmed as the motive, this would be the deadliest such attack in the U.S. since a white supremacist murdered 11 at a Pittsburgh synagogue last year. In our polarized times, charges of anti-Semitism are often used as a cudgel against political opponents, right and left. Yet anti-Semitism feeds on conspiracy thinking across the political spectrum and is often a warning of a wider social decay. It's a commentary on the lack of seriousness about anti-Semitism that on the night of the murders, politicians and media were sounding the alarm over anti-Semitism where none existed. The New York Times reported that... I'm not even going to finish the sentence. New York Times reported that Donald Trump... Okay, so this is going to be totally objective reporting, I'm sure. Was signing an executive order that will, quote, will effectively interpret Judaism as a race or nationality in order to crack down on boycott Israel movement on college campuses. Thousands of tweets condemned the administration for supposedly denying Jews Americanness. The order was released Wednesday and does nothing of the sort. It merely affirms that discrimination against Jews in education would violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Act if it is based on perceived Jewish ethnic characteristics. But it's Trump, so since he's evil orange man, it must be a bad thing. Let's see. Overreaction to distorted media reports about the Trump administration isn't news. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, it can obfuscate the nature of the problem. Yeah, they tend to do that a lot, as I was talking about previously. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said that the Jersey City attack that anti-Semitism has reached the doorstep of New York City. Yet Mr. de Blasio's tenure has seen a surge in attacks by thugs on Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn. Anti-Semitism is confined to the fringes of American life, and we need to keep it there. Stopping the spread requires being clear-headed about the world's oldest hatred, not rushing to project it onto political enemies. Yep. And then I have another one about anti-Semitism and Jews, or we're just going to move on to impeachment. We will move on to impeachment. But yeah, I found that very frustrating, the parallels with, just attacking your political enemies and being dishonest about that. It happened with Covington, it happened just now, and I just remembered talking with somebody about Trump, and they just kind of said, oh, that anti-Semite. And I said, can you explain how he's an anti-Semite? Because he seems to be one of the most pro-Israel presidents that we have ever had. He seems to be a friend of Israel to me. I've talked to other... See, it's usually progressive Jews that aren't observant that make accusations like that. And the ones that are more religious and observant are like, oh, well, America stands with Israel, Trump stands with Israel, we don't have a beef with him, and we would never call him anti-Semitic because it doesn't make any freaking sense. Also, he has members of his family that are Jewish. So, what is your deal with this guy? It's just nonsense. And I mentioned that, and they just kind of you actually saw the cognitive dissonance settle in for a second. And I was like, wow, okay, that was reassuring, because it seems like words can actually communicate things still. Because sometimes I get discouraged where it seems like, well, if you already believe something, there's no such thing as persuasion. Persuasion died sometime in the 2010s. We'll have to write an epitaph for it. So I'm going to move to the bridge for our next topic. I always click my tongue rhythmically. I go... It's the Teutons theme from Age of Empires. Let's see, what do we got? Let's begin with the editorial board. The incredible shrinking impeachment. The Democratic grounds for ousting Trump are weak and damaging to constitutional norms. Bribery, extortion, and other claims vanish as Democrats narrow their articles of impeachment and include no violation of law. Yeah, because bribery and extortion probably had a certain threshold of evidence, and the other ones are more vague, and they can, just move forward with that. So that's it? That's all there is? After all the talk of obstruction of justice, collusion with Russia, bribery, extortion, profiting from the presidency, and more, House Democrats have reduced the articles of impeachment against President Trump to 2, abuse of power and the obstruction of Congress. Honey, we shrunk the impeachment. Ha 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 ha. Delightful. Democrats on the Judiciary Committee will vote as early as Thursday on the text of the two articles they unveiled Thursday, and they will rush it to the floor next week. I'm looking for my coffee. There it is. It's enough to suspect that Democrats understand they are offering the weakest case for impeachment since Andrew Johnson, that the public isn't convinced, and so they simply want to get it over with. At least Johnson was impeached for violating a specific statute, the Tenure of Office Act, by firing Edwin Stanton as Secretary of War. There was a wide agreement that Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton violated criminal statutes. In this case, Democrats didn't even try to allege a criminal act. Yeah, I think they are leveraging against the feelings of people. I remember somebody was talking about this, and like Adam Schiff was saying something about like he'll get away with manipulating the election again if we don't do it. And it's just like, well, yeah, but you didn't prove it the first time. And I heard them talking about it on the radio and all these commentators, and there was nobody there on the panel, of course, to correct them and be like, yeah, but you never proved any of this. It was just, kind of based on your feelings, and you had a 2.5-year investigation to, bring forward evidence to prove your claim, and that didn't happen. So do you know something that we don't know? Or do you just not think much of our intelligence? Seems to be the case. Whatever happened to bribery and extortion? Democrats spent weeks talking them up as crimes of Mr. Trump's Ukrainian interventions. They had turned to those words as focus groups with voters found them more compelling than quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. I was thinking about Austin Powers. Yes, squid pro row. Yet suddenly they're gone. Yeah, I guess they had the focus group and they did the testing and they said, yeah, it just doesn't, it doesn't click. We need to have catchy phrase. It's like one big commercial. Have Democrats concluded that Mr. Trump's actions aren't illegal under statutes that have specific meaning? No, let's make it vague and then appeal to people's feelings endlessly. Because we respect the electorate so much. Because that's how democracy runs, on feelings. Democrats have retreated instead to charge abuse of power, a phrase general enough for anything Congress wants to stuff into it. They don't even pretend anymore to prove a quid pro quo. Instead, they assert that Mr. Trump, in his phone call with Ukraine's president, solicited the interference of a foreign government in the 2020 election in pursuit of personal political benefit. They also assert that this compromised the national security of the United States and undermined the integrity of the United States democratic process. Their problem is that Mr. Trump didn't withhold military aid to Ukraine, and even if he had, he would have merely been returning to Barack Obama's policy of denying lethal aid. How would that have jeopardized national security? Well, it's because he's Trump and he's Orange Man and he's bad, whereas, Obama good. That was another thing on this conversation where they were talking about impeachment. One of the ladies brought up President Trump throwing children into cages, and I was just like, you know what? Who built those cages, though? I think Obama built those cages in, 2015, 2016. But, Orange Man bad. Orange Man bad. I'm going to stick to the topic, sorry. I just keep interjecting all these things that are, objectively true, but there's no I don't know. Every president also solicits actions from foreign leaders that he hopes will help him politically at home. But Orange Man bad. We don't condone Mr. Trump's mention of Joe Biden in his call to Ukraine's president, which was far from perfect and reflects his often bad judgment. Yeah. He said the call was perfect. It was a perfect phone call. But abuse of power on this evidence is a new and low standard for impeachment that will come back to haunt future presidents of all parties. As for corrupting the 2020 election, even if Ukraine had announced an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden, Mr. Trump couldn't know how effective it would be, how long it would take, or whether it would even exonerate them. The election is still a year away. If the mere announcement of a foreign government's investigation into corruption can poison the U.S. election, then American democracy must be weaker than even its enemies think. Yeah, this whole process is just projecting such weakness to the world. That's another thing that they were saying on the radio. It's even if we can't win impeachment, it's our moral responsibility to do so. And I go, God, you don't even know what moral. It's goofy. It's embarrassing. If you had a sense of principles, you would have the decency to be embarrassed about this thing. It's so gaudy. The second Democratic article is weaker in that it amounts to impeaching Mr. Trump because he is resisting their subpoenas. Without lawful cause or excuse, President Trump directed executive branch agencies, offices, and officials not to comply with those subpoenas, the article charges. His lawful cause is defending his presidential powers under the Constitution. Every modern president has, to some extent or another, resisted congressional or special counsel subpoenas. Nixon and Mr. Clinton did until they lost at the Supreme Court. House Democrats are refusing even to fight in court, claiming impeachment gives them plenary power to see all documents and any witnesses they want. This ignores that the Constitution stipulates co-equal branches that each have the right to defend their powers. Yes, but we have the advantage here, and we're the good people, so everybody should just kowtow to us. If Democrats are right in their claim, then every president essentially works for Congress. We should skip elections and just let Congress choose the president. Democrats also claim the emergency of time, and as usual, Representative Adam Schiff puts this case in the least credible way. Haha. The argument is, why don't you just wait? Amounts to this. Why don't you just let Mr. Trump cheat in one more election? Why not let him cheat just one more time? Mr. Schiff told the press as the articles were unveiled. But Mr. Trump didn't cheat to win in 2016, as Robert Mueller's Russia collusion investigation demonstrated after 2 years of looking. I don't understand this. I have talked to people about this, and it's like, we went through the process. There was no evidence. So what do you know that I don't know beyond your freaking feelings? And it doesn't get beyond the feelings. As for 2020, the Constitution includes no clause for preemptive impeachment to prevent acts that the president might commit. Democrats wrap these charges in high-toned rhetoric about this solemn day and quotes from Benjamin Franklin. But they are essentially impeaching Mr. Trump because they despise him and the way he governs. And honestly, it feels like they kind of despise us. Like, as American people, it's like, get on board, or you are, with Trump and the white supremacists and blah, 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 blah. Hate speech, blah, blah, blah. This is the classic standard of maladministration which the founders explicitly considered but excluded from the Constitution as grounds for impeachment. They did so because they feared that partisan Congresses would too easily impeach presidents of the opposite political faction on this subjective basis rather than for serious offenses. But, I'm not going to say it. In their wisdom, the American people seem to have figured all this out. Yeah, I guess we're not as dumb as you think we are. Despite one-sided lobbying by the impeachment press, the polls show that a majority opposes removing Mr. Trump from office. This may be the real explanation behind the Democrats' move to shrink impeachment. Democrats now want a fast and furious vote to satisfy their most anti-Trump partisans, dump the mess on Senate, and campaign on something else. That's a luxury you have when you control the media to such a degree. You just get to set the tone of things and stage it out. They shouldn't get off that easy. By defining impeachment down, they are turning what should be a rare and extraordinary constitutional remedy into a routine tool of partisan warfare. They are harming constitutional norms, as the liberals say. Americans will decide in 11 months whether Mr. Trump deserves to remain in office, but they should also keep the impeachment vote very much in mind when they decide whether Democrats deserve to keep the House. Yeah, and we'll see how that goes for them. Yeah, Democrats, you got to sort some things out in your party, because it seems like you're trying to win a campaign on, we're not Trump, vote for us because we're not Trump. It's like, well, what you stand for, though? We can't really agree. I'm going to leave ship interior, return to sector space. And I'm going to read this one by Karl Rove. And we'll get to that in a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to refill my cup of coffee. And while I do it, I'm going to return to my little theme music for the day. I like that song. And I should probably put credits for the songs that I use. Let's see if I can find it. But yeah, this next one is going to be from Karl Rove. But yeah, I'm gonna go get some coffee. I'll leave you with some music.
Try not to be a pessimist, but on the other hand, I cram to understand your plans. Feminine ways, it's like a maze with the minotaur in the middle. Women be thinking we all dogs without the kennel. You don't even know what I've been through. Cause y'all be coming with all types of drama I don't wanna get into. All types of temptations with your small waist and your thick hips. And man, look, too much to deal with, but real you got. Too much to deal to see if it's real or not. Couple of ladies I met was on point though. A lot of y'all be getting me annoyed though. It's like you be trying to see how many hearts you can break in the smallest amount of time, but maybe I'm exaggerating.
But it gets aggravating. Talking another language and nobody's translating. Alright, back to Karl Rove, who claims independents are impeachment skeptics. They see partisan bickering, hypocrisy, and a waste of time and, public funds. I'm just gonna sail across the galaxy while I chat this up. Here we go. Bum, ba, bum, and this is the theme. What the heck is going on? As my recent travels sent me ricocheting around America, I heard this exasperation about impeachment from the people who will decide the 2020 election. A small number of moderate voters truly up for grabs. Democratic and Republican activists alike are lapping up everything about impeachment. They know the House will impeach President Trump and the Senate will acquit him, but each day's events add to the moral outrage both sides feel. I've been trying to divine the sentiments of those in the middle, the people who could vote either for Mr. Trump or his Democratic opponent. They are mostly independents, though some are loosely linked to one of the two parties. Virtually all recoil from politics. Most have turned off cable TV. A few favor impeachment, but in my unscientific study, many more look at impeachment and ask, as a country, don't we deserve better than this? For them, the situation lacks the clarity it has for partisan politics, who clamor for Mr. Trump's defenestration, that means throwing him from a window, and partisan Republicans who scream that it's a witch hunt. My rolling focus group over the past few weeks indicates to me that independents are mostly skeptical of impeachment and often see it as a waste of time and energy. The Democrats' charges seem underwhelming to them. Yeah, vague enough, because if you make it too specific, you can't prove it. And they seem to have a problem with that. And it's like, hey, look at the history of what you're doing. It seems to be a trend here. Maybe you might want to wake up for a second. Contradicted by evidence and containing landmines of hypocrisy that could blow up Democrats too. Take the claim that Mr. Trump engaged in a quid pro quo with a foreign power to advance his political interests, that he withheld vital military aid. He didn't actually say quid pro quo, I'm just being funny. Military aid from Ukraine until its government committed to investigate his rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter's activities in the former Soviet state. So I'm just going to cut in and say this. Another thing that doesn't make sense is they're saying that, he's Putin's puppet and all of that, but it seems like he's trying to get people in NATO to pay their dues, which they are required to do as being part of NATO. I think, I don't know a lot about this, but I feel like it was supposed to be 2% GDP for most of these countries that are in the coalition, and they just haven't been doing it, and they're expecting America to just, basically shore up their military budgets by, us taking care of it. That doesn't really stack up to me logically with, I feel like if he was in Putin's pocket, he'd just be like, sure, don't pay your NATO. He'd be undermining NATO. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me, but we'll continue. While many independents believe Mr. Trump was seeking such an agreement and don't like it one bit, they don't necessarily see an impeachable offense. Yeah, they can separate principle from their feelings. It's a rare ability. It's like a superpower these days. They point out that the aid was delivered and Ukrainians didn't even know it was delayed, and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he was never... Can you just spell it Vladimir? It's Volodymyr. Says he was never asked for a quid pro quo. Moreover, when Democrats were in power, they never provided the anti-tank missiles and other lethal assistance Ukraine desired. But they identify as good people, so it's not a problem. Mr. Trump did. This leaves many swing voters skeptical that the Ukraine call justifies removing the president from office months before a national election. And don't forget the landmine that Democrats could trigger by pressing their claim on March 2012. President Obama was caught on camera telling Russia's then president, Dmitry Medvedev, that his soon-to-be successor, Vladimir Putin, know that on all these issues, but particularly missile defense, this can be solved, but it's important for him to give me space. This is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility. Mr. Medvedev promised to alert Mr. Putin that if he didn't stir up trouble for Mr. Obama, he'd be rewarded with post-campaign flexibility on missile defense and other issues. Whoa! There are explanations as to why this was different from what Mr. Trump did. Mr. Obama wasn't asking Russia for dirt on Mitt Romney, but there was no Democratic outrage about that squid pro row, so why now? I'll tell you why. It's because Orange Man is bad in feelings. That leaves the obstruction charge. Mr. Trump's refusal to honor subpoenas demanding he provide documents and allow aides to testify strikes many independents as Washington infighting, not the supreme threat to our republic that Democrats claim. Yeah. Here, swing voters are right. The Justice Department's opinion is that the executive branch's long-standing positive reaffirmed The executive branch's long-standing positive, reaffirmed by numerous administrations of both political parties, is that the president's immediate advisors are absolutely immune from congressional testimonial processes. Moreover, this immunity is rooted in the constitutional separation of powers and the immunity of the president himself from congressional compulsion to testify. This opinion isn't merely Mr. Trump's or Attorney General William Barr's. It was sent by Eric Holder's Justice Department in July 2014 to the Obama White House in response to Republican demands that a low-level West Wing aide appear before the House Oversight Committee. Yeah, but that was then, and this is now. Which Democrats threatened to impeach Mr. Obama then, or the other times he ignored congressional Republican subpoenas. It's not about principles, though, it's about power. This helps explain why some polls suggest independents have turned against impeachment. These voters are not paying as much attention to all this folderol as their Republican and Democratic neighbors. Instead, they are asking if this is good for the country. Should Congress be spending so much time on a drama in which only the quality of the actor's performance is the question? Yeah, there was that other article like, how did you feel about when you were removed from your appointment in Ukraine? How did you feel? They kept asking about feelings. For most swing voters, this impeachment controversy is simply affirming their low opinion of both parties and delaying the start of the national conversation they want to hear in 2020. Since their party is the one pushing impeachment, Democrats have the most to lose. And it says, Mr. Rove helped organize the Political Action Committee, American Crossroads, and is the author of The Triumph of William McKinley from Simon & Schuster 2015. And that's that. That, as they say, is that. Yeah, as far as this impeachment thing is concerned, it's very difficult to talk about because, it should be easy to talk about because we should be able to identify things that have happened and are true and be able to separate those from our feelings. And I feel like I can make a whole video about this because there are certain things that are part of policy where I could say I personally don't think it's a good idea, but we are a nation of people that have differing opinions, and I don't think that policy should be around what I feel. It should be what is best for most or all Americans. And that is a kind of compromise that I think a lot of people are, not on just one side, but on both sides, are unwilling to make, or it doesn't even occur to them that that's how they should base their decisions. And you can't really sustain the country like that. It's just not going to work. But yeah, there's this one thing that I'm going to bring up Scott Adams again. He was talking about he calls it the, this is somewhat relevant. I'm just mentioning it for the general principle of, not the principle, the general idea that, I'm struggling here. People are living in two different realities, and you can say, well, this is what actually happened, and they can just insist, well, that means something. That means something to me based on, my feelings or my interpretation or whatever. But just as an example of this, he was talking about the Charlottesville speech that Trump gave, and he calls it the good people hoax, and the claim from media outlets that they said over and over and over again on NPR and CNN and all of these different outlets that Trump was basically saying that Nazis and Antifa are good people. And if you look at the transcript, which is available and has been available, he actually didn't say that. He was talking about people around their attitudes about bringing down the monuments. There was, at the time, a lot of debate about whether we should have these monuments up. And he said, well, there are good people with good arguments on both sides, and that's what he was talking about. Now, it has widely been misreported that is not what he was saying. And I have talked to people, and I have said, you can look at the transcript and you can see what he actually said. He did not say that. And they still insist willfully that that is what he said because they heard it on the news, and that is their basis. And I said, well, you can find out what they actually say. And if you put so much stock into what they say on the news, do you remember Covington, where they said all this heinous stuff that these teenage kids did? Nick Sandmann did? He literally stood there and smiled and did nothing, and half the country just loathed him. And that never caused any dissonance in them. That never caused them to be, well, I'm not going to project what they felt, but it just seemed like a lot of people were willing to hate a kid for basically doing nothing. And in the meantime, the black Israelites were in the background, and they were just saying all this, racist, hateful nonsense. But of course, they flew under the radar until earlier this week, where they go and shoot up a synagogue. But we're more concerned about the kid in the MAGA hat, right? Frankly, I find it very pathetic, and people should really start critically questioning this media and not basing your opinions on, well, I saw it reported that. And it's like, well, after they report on it enough, it might behoove you to check the source material and see if they're actually doing their job as journalists, or just relying on your assumption that they are authoritative. Especially now, I don't see how this far into this presidency you can still be so credulous. But anyway, that's the show. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time.